Hi folks, we started our um, game controller model today, our first kind of proper model of 2021 session. So without too much further ado, let's run over it again for our notes of this session. So here we are in a brand new Blender scene, and we're going to start with our controller. We're going to start with the default cube, and we're going to work from there. So if I just do a quick top view here by clicking on the blue Z, and I'll just take the annotation pen out. The approximate shape of the game controller is a sort of a wedge shape in the middle with two kind of wings coming down either side for the bit that you hold onto. So this is kind of how we're going to start our kind of basic shape off. So let's just go into edit mode, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split our cube in half here and use a mirror modifier, so that the left, we just model one side of the controller and the other side becomes modeled automatically for us. So I'm going to add an edge loop here in line with the green y-axis. So I'm going to do Control R, and I'm just going to move the mouse there till I get that yellow there that's running in the same direction as the green, and click, and I'm going to right click just to leave it dead in the middle. And then I want to get rid of this entire right hand side. So I'm going to select face select mode up here at the top. I'm going to click on that face on the right hand side, and then I'm going to press the delete key. Oh sorry, my screen cap keys are off. Let me put those back on, they switch themselves off. So then I'm going to click X for delete, and I'm going to choose not just faces. I don't just want to get rid of the faces, but I'm going to choose vertices to get rid of those vertices around that face. And those vertices, obviously, then by deleting the vertices, the edges that were coming out of here as well, those are all deleted, and similarly the faces, the half faces there, they're all gone. So now we have this perfect half cube. So to add the mirror modifier, I come over here on the right hand side to the to the modifier panel. It looks like a little wrench icon, and I add modifier and I choose mirror, and now we've got a perfect cube back again, except it's only half of it is we can touch. This half is just automatic, and we're going to just make sure that clipping is on. So clipping would prevent you kind of bringing things across this middle line, and it will weld things together at this middle line as well. So we may not need it in this model, but it's a good thing to have on. So let's look down from the top again. So again, I'm going to click Z here, just look down from the top. So to get our wedge shape, we're going to want to take this corner over here and just move it out a bit. So I want to move the whole edge here, really, not just one vertex. So I'm going to look to the side a bit, select edge selection here in the middle of these three buttons, and I'm going to click on that edge that I want to move, and then I'm going to return to the top view, and then I'm going to do G to move, and I'm going to drag it down a bit until I get a shape like I want. So I'm going to move it to somewhere like there until I get that approximate shape. And now I'm going to extrude this face. So extrude is like pulling something out of an existing thing to make a new shape. So I'm going to select that whole face again, face select mode, third button here, select that face. I'm going to go back to the top view again, and I'm going to hit E to extrude, E. And I'm just going to pull that out some distance. So you can see what it's done. It's made a whole new kind of block here. It's all, every edge here is extruded into a new face. So that's what extrude can do. But I don't like the angle, and everything else is no good right now. So once I've extruded out a little bit from this top view again, I'm going to G to move it so that it's kind of pointed down a bit. And I'm going to R to rotate a bit so that I kind of get more of an angle that I want. And now it's very wide, so I'm going to S and X to scale it in X a bit till I get sort of better width. And again, I'm going to maybe R a bit more to rotate. And now I'm kind of happy with that general shape. I've got kind of getting to be a bit like a game controller in shape, but it is very thick at the minute. But maybe we won't worry about that for the moment. We'll kind of I want to have a look at the next step first before I decide to change that thickness. So obviously this is a very blocky shape, but often we're making things that are quite curved. We try and work at this blocky level and we let the computer smooth things out for us automatically. So I'm going to add another modifier, second modifier here on this side, and this one is called a subdivision surface. And immediately I turned it into what I described earlier as an ugly banana. So that doesn't look very promising at all, but actually it's better than it looks. We want to do two things to improve the appearance of this. Firstly, it's only doing one subdivision at the moment. It means everywhere where there was one face, it's broken at one time in one direction and one time in the other direction. So every one face has become four faces now. But it's not enough to really give it a smooth result. So we're going to bump this up to 2. So that's already starting to look a little bit better. But also it's currently using flat shading. Flat shading looks right for some things that are very mechanical with hard edges, but for other things like the controller body where it's quite smooth surface, flat shading doesn't look right. So we're going to return to object mode. You can hit the tab key or select object mode up here, and we're going to right click on the object here and we're going to choose shade smooth, and immediately you see that now looks much smoother, looks much better. So I can return to edit mode again and you can still see that nice smooth appearance. So now it still looks pretty thick in the vertical direction, so we really want to resolve that a bit. So I'm going to just press A to select everything, and then I'm going to scale it in Z, so S and Z, and I'm just going to bring it down till the thickness looks more appropriate. That looks not bad at all. Now the other thing is that these ends that you hold on to generally, they're not dead flat with the controller, but rather they kind of angle downwards a bit. So I'm just going to select this one face at the end here, at the end of the handle, and I'm just going to move it down with G and Z. I'm just going to bring it down a bit until that looks kind of comfortable to hold on to. And I think I'm also just going to scale it in a bit, just to make this end a little bit smaller, so it's kind of more comfortable in the hand. So I'm just going to hit S on that and just bring it down a bit so that it looks kind of more natural. Now that's looking quite good as a kind of basic controller shape already, but I'd like to do a little bit more. Let me switch to the top view. So one of the first things I'd like to adjust here is that this corner is very round here, whereas I would like it to be a little bit, still smooth and rounded, but a little bit squarer. What this subdivision surface is doing is it's smoothing things out. It's kind of rounding things out between the edges, so you get like a clean curve between each of the pairs of edges. The closer two edges are together, the tighter the curve that it puts in. So if I can put in another edge around here, then this will become kind of straight. The line here will become kind of quite a bit straighter, and this corner will be a tighter, smaller curve. If that doesn't make sense, it will in a minute when you see what happens. So I'm going to do Control-R again for an edge loop, and I'm going to just go near this top edge here so that we get this line cutting across this area that we want. Now you can see already that's had an effect on the corner. The corner is already kind of a tighter curve, and the more that I slide that towards the left, the tighter that corner gets. In fact, if you go so those two edges are almost touching, you nearly get a very hard edge there, but I don't want it to be that tight, so I'm going to leave them about that far apart there, and I like the look of that. Now the other thing I'd like to do is I would like to go and look at the bottom of the controller, and I would like around here a bit kind of coming down where the kind of triggers would be at the front of the controller. So most of the kind of modern controllers have this kind of trigger area. So what I would like to do is I'd like to have a face just in this area here that I can use to extrude downwards to create a nice little bump here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another edge loop, another Control-R, and I'm going to put it so that it runs right across through these edges. See that it actually runs right down the handle and around and all the way across the top again. So that's fine, but I might just slide it so it's a bit closer to that, to this side maybe, and that gives us another edge loop. And then, actually, now that I look at it, I'm starting to find the whole thing a little bit big this way. So I'm going to maybe just select all and just again scale Z a little bit more. Don't be afraid to adjust as you go. There's no hard measurements here, so it's all about the feeling of it. Does it feel right? Does it, you know? Do you need to adjust it a bit? You can keep trying to adjust it as you go. So I'm going to go to edge select mode, there, face select mode, excuse me, there, and I'm just going to select that one face. And I'm going to now extrude this face, E, and I'm just going to let it bring it down a little bit. And that creates those two bumps. But I kind of feel like I want them now more towards the center. So what I can do is I could move this entire edge loop, I could slide this entire edge loop this direction a little bit to widen this area out. So I might do that before I extrude. So I'm going to Control Z and just undo that extrude, and then I'm going to go to edge select mode, and I want to select this whole edge loop. So what I do is I hold down the Alt key first and then click on any one of the edges in that loop, and it'll select the entire loop all the way around. And then I could move it with G, but then that's very sort of wild and crazy. You can move any direction. That's not really what I want. But you can, if you press G twice, G, now I know the second G doesn't show up over here, it actually slides the edge instead, and you can see that instead of moving freely, it doesn't move freely, it moves along the other edges that it's attached to, like it's on rails. So that's good sometimes, and that's what I want. So again, so GG, and I'm just going to move it a little bit that way. Now I'm going to select that again, select that face again, and I'm going to extrude it, bring it down, and I'm happier with the appearance of that. That to me looks pretty nice. Okay, so that is, if I return to object mode, that is our controller body done. The basics of the controller body. So I am going to, now that we're back in object mode, I'm just going to go over here to the scene collection panel, and I'm just going to double click on the word cube, and I'm going to call it controller body. I just hit enter. So it's a good idea to name things in your scenes. It's just one of those things you might think it's not important, but then the more you work on a scene, the harder it is to remember what, you know, cube 1 and cube 5 were, and what cylinder 1 and cylinder 6 were compared to each other. And so if you put proper names on things, it makes it a lot easier to work with a scene. So it's a good discipline to get into, just always to kind of name your scene, name your objects in the scene. It just really helps find stuff. So we're going to start now. The second bit we did today, so that was the controller body done. The second bit we did today was to do a thumbstick. So for that I'm going to start, we started with the cube for the body, but the thumbstick is much more shaped like a cylinder, so we're going to use a cylinder object instead and start with that. So I'm going to just add a mesh, and I'm going to add a cylinder like that. And now we've got a new cylinder sitting in here. Now the first thing I'd like to do is just go into edit mode, so I'm going to hit tab this time, and I want to scale this down to about the size we want. Oh, but once it goes inside once I scale it, I'm starting to get it near the size I want, and then I can't see it anymore. So let me right click and just cancel that operation for a second. And first, before I scale it, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to switch X-ray on. This makes objects transparent, and so now I can still see inside the controller body. So I'm going to scale again till I get it down to about the size that feels right for this controller, and I think that looks at the moment pretty good. I mean, we can adjust the scale later anyway, but that at the moment feels pretty good to me. So I'm going to hide the controller body object now and just put it away for the time being by clicking on this eye icon here, and that means it's just not in our way as we work on the thumbstick. So the first thing I'd like to do with the thumbstick is I would like to kind of there's going to be a kind of a wide piece on the top, then a very narrow piece here for the stick, and then you're going to have a wider area down here at the bottom where it's kind of joining into the body of the controller. So I want to put in a couple of edge loops here to make this skinny area here where the stick is. So I'm going to add an edge loop again, Control R. And you'll find if you roll the scroll wheel now up, you can actually change the number of cuts that you're doing. So I'm going to roll them down, you can change the number back down again. So I want 2 here, so I'm going to do this and click 2. And again, just right click to leave them sort of, then now it's in perfect thirds. So I'm going to switch X-ray off again. Actually, we don't need it for the time being, so I just clicked that off. So that's created those 2 cuts, which is great. Another way to have done that, I'll just show a second way to do that, was you could Control R. Sometimes the scroll wheel, we have had some people with scroll wheels, it just didn't work that well. So if you find that hard to remember with the scroll wheel, or for some reason your scroll wheel is not working well, you can add 1 like that, and again I'm going to right click just to leave it in the middle. But this little menu down here pops up sometimes when you do an operation, and it lets you adjust the operation that you've just performed. Now, once you do another thing, immediately afterwards this menu will vanish, so you kind of have to use it straight away if you want to use it. But this one is here now, it says loop, cut and slide, which is what we just did. So if I expand it here by clicking on the little arrow, you can see there that one of the things it's offering you is number of cuts. So again, I can adjust the number of cuts right there. So sometimes this is very handy for adjusting stuff as well. Or sometimes you want a very precise number on something, you can kind of do it in here. Now obviously for cuts it's easy, but you know, there's other operations where you might want to specify a very specific number, and it would be hard to do it any other way, or to know that you had done it exactly right. So loop, so that's it. So now I've got 2 cuts, so both of those are good ways to do the same thing. So I want to now bring this entire section in and make it like a thin cylinder in the middle. Now the first thing I want to do is maybe select it, so I'm going to switch to face select mode, again the third of those buttons, and I want to select all these faces in a row, all the way around, a whole loop of faces. So I can do that by pressing the Alt key down and then clicking on one of these faces, and it'll select the entire loop. Now actually there's 2 ways that it can select kind of faces in a line here. One of them is what I've just done, and the other is that one. So how do you tell it which one of those 2 you want? Well, it's all about really which edge you click closest to. If you wanted to go that way, then you want to click close to this edge on the left or right. If you wanted to go up and down, then click close to the edge, top or bottom. So that's, you're always in control of which one you get, but you just have to indicate to Blender which kind of direction you want it to go in by making sure you click near the right side. So now we've got all of those faces selected all the way around. So if I was to, this is the wrong way to do this next bit, but if I was to just hit scale now, you see, because these edges here are connected to the vertices here, they are going to follow them as they scale inwards. So I need to kind of add another bit of geometry here, so that this edge stays straight up and down, and then there's something else that kind of, another bit of geometry that goes in. There's a few ways you could do this, but the easiest way is to hit E for extrude, but don't move anything. So use the right mouse button then just to leave everything exactly where it is. Now the thing is that it looks like it hasn't changed at all, but it has. If I just go to edge select mode and just show you for a second, there's an edge there, and I might just select it, and there's an edge underneath. They're 2 separate. There's an edge under, you can't, because they're right on top of each other, but you just have to trust me. There's an edge underneath and an edge above that are 2 separate things. Now there's like 2 edges here where you can only see one. Once I do this next bit, it'll be a lot more clear. So if I scale this now, and I want to scale but not change the Z, so I want it to stay the same height, scale, shift and Z, and then scale it in, you'll see what you couldn't see before because they were all on top of each other. You can see now that there is, that this edge and this edge are not the same, and there are faces in between them, but they were all kind of, these edges were all just had no length before, but they were there. So that's one way to do it. So now we've got the basics of a kind of a stick shape. So we want to do a bit more to it to make it look good. So I want to first of all change this thumbstick piece at the top, so that it has kind of what you might call beveled edges here, so that it kind of smooth goes in at the top and bottom into a nice shape. So I'm going to add add edge loops again, Control R, and I want 2, and I'm just going to again right click to, Control R, 2, left click, and then right click to leave them in place. But I want them to be a bit closer to the top and bottom, and I want to move them up and I want to move them evenly. So actually the easiest way to do that is to select this whole loop, again Alt, face select, click, and select all of those, and then I just scale in Z, and actually what it'll move them up and down at by the same amount, so it'll be nice and even. So I'm going to go up to about that much, and then I want to bring this and this edge loops, scale them in a bit to make them smaller. So I'm going to select this top one first, so Alt, so edge select mode, Alt, and click on any of those edges around the top, and it'll select the whole loop around the top. And then I want to select this loop around the bottom as well. So now I need to hold Shift again. Shift kind of adds to the current selection, and again Alt. So Shift and Alt, and then click on one of those edges. Now you see I've got this whole ring selected and this whole ring selected. So if I now scale those, they'll come in by the same amount, which is nice. And that's given us the sort of shape that we want at the top of the thumbstick. So I also would like to make the top of this thumbstick sort of curve down a bit. So let me just face select, and I just again select just that top by clicking on it. I had the bottom, that bottom ring as well. I just want this top bit selected, and I'm going to inset it. So inset puts a face inside another face, if you like. So if I hit inset and then drag it, you can see what's happening there. So I just move it so it's quite small in the middle. Not absolutely zero, but just quite small. And then I'm just going to move this down by doing G, Z, and just bring that down a bit. And that'll create a nice scooped out bit on the top of the thumbstick. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to object mode for a second and just take a look at our stick as it stands at the moment. Now again, something you can see is that it actually looks quite faceted at the moment. It's not smooth, and that's because it's on flat shading. So I'm going to, much like the other one, I'm going to switch it to smooth shading, which looks pretty good, but we've got some weird bits that don't look right. I would say that this looks a bit weird here. It's kind of not very clear where one bit joins the other. They kind of blur into each other in an odd way. Similarly down here, and definitely at the bottom here, this looks very peculiar. It's very hard to tell where the edge is. So particularly the reason for the problem down here is that we have, I'm going to go back into edit mode, we have what's called an n-gon, which is a face with more than 4 sides. And those tend to look very weird when you use flat shading, or smooth shading. So actually, we don't even need this face because it's going to be never seen. It's going to be underneath everything else. So I'm just going to make sure I'm in face select mode, select it, and I'm just going to go X and choose faces just to dump it, just to get rid of it. And that's immediately going to improve the look, and we have a nice sharp edge down here at the bottom now. So that's fixed one of those problems. The other thing is, again back into edit mode, the other thing is if we put another edge loop in here, so Control R, and then bring it quite close to the inside one, not to touch it, but just very close to it. And similarly then on this one up here, again Control R, and then just bring it in quite close. You'll see that has the effect, if I return to object mode for a second, that has the effect of really sharpening up those edges there so that they look much better. So I also want to make this flare out at the bottom. So instead of going straight down, I want this to kind of flare into like a cone shape. So I'm going to Alt, edge select, Alt and click, and select that whole edge loop at the bottom, and then I'm just going to scale it out so we get a nice cone shape like that. And then I'm going to make a few more little changes here. So I want to make it kind of a lip here, and just kind of make this whole thing look a bit like it's kind of like this is a case, and then on, you know, there's kind of a gap. I don't know how to say it. Let's do it and it'll be apparent the shape. So I'm going to put another Control R, I'm going to put another edge loop in there and bring it out near that other one. And then I'm going to immediately put yet another one in there and bring it really close to that one I've just made, but this time G and Z, and move it down a bit so that we get that nice rim effect. That's a little bit different to how I did it in the room today, but the end result is pretty much identical. So now you've got this kind of stick with the kind of dome that it's attached to, all in this kind of nice, neat housing. So that's a lot. That's pretty much how thumbsticks on gamepads look. So that's our thumbstick, and I'm going to go over here in object mode, double click on this again, and I'm going to call this thumbstick. Alright, and just bring back the controller for a second. This is not part of it now, but I'm just going to show maybe what it would look like. So I'm just going to G maybe to move it over there, and then G, Z to move it up a bit until we get the height right. G, Z. So that's kind of how it looks a bit awkward now. Let's maybe move it a little bit over. Yeah. All right. So it's cutting through that bit. So I don't really want that. G. Anyway, this is the bit we'll do properly next week. But I just wanted to show it now. It's probably a little bit big actually here at the moment. So I'm probably going to want to make it overall a bit smaller. So let me just hide the controller body again for a second. Go back into edit mode, A to select all, S to scale it back a little bit. That's probably going to look better. I'm going too far now with this, but object mode again. Top view, X-ray mode just so I can see. G, to position it about there. X-ray, back to solid view. And then G, Z, just to start bringing it up. Yeah, and I think immediately that's looking better. So something like that, I think is what we're going to want. Yeah, that kind of blends. That kind of fits in. That fits fairly nicely onto the controller now. Okay, so that's it, and then we can put another one here if we're going to do Xbox style, or up here if you're doing PlayStation style. And we're going to add a few more buttons, and we're going to color it and everything else, but that's all for next week and maybe a little bit for the week after. But again, all that moving the button and everything else, that's not part of today. We'll leave that for the time being. Right now I just want to leave those two objects separate. Okay, thanks folks, that was reasonably quick. Hopefully it was clear. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.